And Ben currently leads a team of over 20 business development managers and SDRs. So he's having to be responsible for a lot of ambitious individuals and also probably managing some egos in there. He cares about investing in his own development, and he's going to share his personal experience of learning from failure. So I'm interested to hear about that kind of authentic story. Can we have a round of applause for Ben, our final speaker, for the panel?
All right, I'm going to commit a cardinal sin straight away. I've got some notes. I'm getting married next Saturday, so my mind is completely chock-a-block with flower arrangements and the colors of table runners and stuff like this. Exactly, yeah, exactly. So I'm actually missing a rehearsal dinner to be here. I'm not. Right. About 7 years ago, when I was in the British Army, I had one of the most valuable and rewarding experiences of my life. I failed. Right? And I failed at something really, really big and really important, something that I'd been working towards for years, something that required me to reach a certain level that I was just unable to meet. The details of the failure don't really matter much, right? If you're interested, come and talk to me when I've got more than 7 minutes. But what is important is because of the way I was able to organize my mindset, I was able to treat that failure experience for what it was, which is a uniquely profound learning opportunity. And I want to talk to you guys today about why the way in which most of us typically deal with failure is one of the most wasteful and counterproductive tendencies that we have probably in any area of our lives, right? So let me give you an example, right? Think about how we're conditioned to think about failure. From school, in society, in most work environments, unfortunately, failure is stigmatized, right? Mistakes are stigmatized, they're punished, they're mocked, they're sneered at. And it creates this environment where we are afraid to talk about failure. We're afraid to own it. We're certainly really afraid to sort of get it out in the open and talk about it. And it creates this really visceral psychological reaction in all of us, because every single person in this room, you guys are going to fail, right? It's going to happen to you tomorrow, or the day after, or next week, and it's probably going to happen many, many, many times. So we are all going to encounter this. So let me describe this reaction. In his book, The Chimp Paradox, Professor Steve Peters talks about his model for the human brain. It's a really compelling and intuitive model. He says that we have a red brain to start with. This is our chimp brain, our prehistoric brain. Right? This is the first place in our mind that interprets any experience or sensation that we might have. But it interprets it in really broad and crude strokes. So the red brain, the chimp brain, is famously obsessed with fight or flight or freeze. Right? That is our red brain. Next, we have our black brain. Okay? This is our hard drive. This is where we store useful autopilots. So these are learned reactions to common experiences. Right? Things that happen again and again and again in our lives, we use these autopilots to deal with them. And lastly, we have our blue brain, our human brain, right? The thing that makes us human. This is where logic lives and reason lives and rationale lives. So I described those autopilots as useful. The problem comes when they are not useful. And that is when we have learned explicitly negative reactions to certain stimuli. And failure is one of those. So let's think about how that actually happens. How does that play out? So maybe tomorrow one of you guys loses a deal, right? Maybe that happens. It's a deal you thought you were going to get and you don't get it. Maybe a conversation with a customer goes really, really badly. In that moment, you fail. Your red brain kicks into life. The evolutionary response, right, that made sense millions of years ago was to fight that or to flee or to freeze. And so your red brain, then your chimp brain tells you freeze. And we send that message down to our black brain, to our autopilot. And because we've been coached to deal so badly with failure, right, to push it away, to be afraid of it, the autopilot that we have is completely unprepared. And we bounce back and forward, black to red, red to black, toxic to toxic. And our blue brain, the logic, the reason, the rationale, the only area of our mind which is actually equipped to help us deal with this situation, it never gets to kick in. So you guys might think, okay, well, what is the big problem here, right? Failure is a negative thing after all, right? We're not looking to fail. We've learned these responses, so they can't be all that bad. And to an extent, we're right. But the thing that we would be missing there is that there is a big, big, important difference between acknowledging something to be negative, which failure is, and responding negatively to a situation, which we absolutely shouldn't do. So how can we respond instead? And how can we train ourselves to deal with these situations really productively? So first, as salespeople, we all have to recognize the massive clash in our professional lives between how often we fail and how we deal with that failure. So the vast majority of people, except from a couple of guys that I sort of recognize, the vast majority of people in this room are individual contributors, right? You are active salespeople, you're quota-carrying salespeople, which means that you fail every single day, however good you are, right? However good you are, there are interactions you have with prospects or customers, meetings, calls, email exchanges, whatever it might be, that do not go to plan. You fail. And you fail in more visceral ways than most professions can even imagine. That is what James was talking about at the start, right? About this role, this profession being really, really difficult. So we fail constantly. In fact, in weeks, months, quarters where you meet your target, you will still probably be able to count more failure than success. And that means we've just got to be comfortable with the fact that at least half of our experience in sales is going to be failing, right? You lose more deals than you win. Over time, at least, right? Over a year period, that is always going to be the dynamic. The problem comes because we lock away all of that experience. That is more than 50% of our professional experience that we lock away. We sweep it under the rug, we don't talk about it. And so we miss all of that incredible area for learning, because failure is the most fertile ground for learning as a salesperson. Right? The reason is that we are playing a zero-sum game in sales. If someone in my team at Ometria wins a deal, some other sales team somewhere else has lost a deal. And vice versa. If we lose, some competitor somewhere else has won. There are no draws in sales, or at least very, very rarely. So, when we lose, we get really clear and tangible data on what we need to do better. We understand that we were worse than competitor X, and therefore we need to pick up our game. But when we win, we don't get that same information, right? We can't tell if it's because we're crushing it or if we were just the least awful option on the table, right? But when we lose, we know for a fact, it doesn't matter how bad we were or the competitor was, that competitor was better than us, and we need to level up. So by taking failure off the table, by sweeping it under the rug, we remove our ability to learn. That's the first major thing. The second thing is, because we do not own failure, because we can't really embrace it, we remove our ability to rescue the situation, right? Ollie is an experienced salesperson. He will have had many situations and experiences, right, where a deal was almost lost, but at the last minute you pulled it out of the bag, right? It's not over until the fat lady signs a contract. So you will have recognized that, right? But because we have been trained to respond to failure with that fear trigger, right, with that red brain response, it removes our ability for creative thinking. It removes our ability to innovate, because the chimp brain is good at a lot of things, but it is not good at thinking creatively or innovatively. So as soon as we become afraid, we are being fueled by fear, we are in that red brain, and we are completely ill-equipped to deal with the situation or rescue the situation. So, let's conclude. Let's be clear. Failure will never be as good as success. Right? Failure doesn't pay the bills, and success is the ultimate compass because it lets us know that we are moving in the right direction. But at the same time, we also know that we need to get failure out into the open. We need to be comfortable talking about it, because that is where all of the learning opportunity truly is. So how do we do that though, right? It's all well and good analyzing the psychology behind it, but what can we actually do when we go back into work tomorrow morning to have a more productive and healthy attitude towards this thing that makes up so much of our professional life. So I've got 3 suggestions for you. Number 1, get to know your chimpanzee, right? Each of you has a chimpanzee. It is a version of you that exists when your red brain kicks in. And you will understand that right now. This will probably resonate with you, what I'm saying, because you will think, hey, when I'm having an argument, or when I feel under threat, or when I get stressed, I start to think a certain way that is just not how I normally think, right? Get to know that tendency of yours. When it kicks in, get good at recognizing it, and get good at recognizing that those are the moments when you absolutely should not be making any calls or sending any emails or making any decisions. That is the time to step back and just look and understand how you behave in those moments. The second is accept failure without inviting it. So my team at Ometria has a mantra: either we win or we learn, right? It is okay to fail. We don't want to fail, but it's okay to fail so long as we learn from it and so long as we build processes that will help us develop the ability to not make that mistake again. And then lastly, check your environment. If you are not in an environment working for an organization that will help you do 1 and 2, that will help you get to know your chimpanzee and accept failure, then you're not working somewhere that is going to help you be the best salesperson you can be and be the healthiest individual that you can be. And that is really, really, really critical. We know that at least 1 in 4 people will experience some sort of mental health problem in their lives. And there is a lot of good evidence that salespeople are probably overrepresented in that number. And clearly the stress of this role and the failure, the highs and lows that come with it are going to be a big contributor to that. Being able to diminish those highs and lows is really, really, really important. To take the rough with the smooth. Failure is going to happen. It is all about responding positively to it and making the best of it. Thank you very much, guys.